We're going to give it just a couple minutes to let some people hop in here, and then we'll get started in just a few. So we see people popping in, so it looks like it is working. We'll just give it a few minutes, and we'll get started in a few minutes. Welcome to the Third and Central podcast, the only podcast dedicated solely to the University of Louisville baseball program. This is Matt Sefcovic, and as always, I'm joined by Terry Pennington from Inside Louisville Baseball as we come to you all live on May 27th as we prepare for the NCAA Tournament. As everybody knows, at this point in time, the Cards are heading down to Nashville in the Vandy's Regional, which we will dive into here in just a little bit. As the tournament field was announced on Monday, pretty exciting around the Commonwealth as 4 teams were announced from the state of Kentucky, with Louisville as a 2 seed down in Nashville. Kentucky was a 3 seed down in Clemson, which we'll talk about that in a minute. I was kind of surprised to hear their name called. D1 Baseball and Baseball America both had the Cats out of the field on their final projections on Sunday going into Monday. Western won the Conference USA. I think I just lost you.
I can hear you now.
So they are heading down to Oxford in the Ole Miss Regional, as well as Murray State. So both of
See if we can find Matt here in a minute. Oh, there he is.
Okay, we're there.
I got you.
All right, can you hear me, Terry?
I can.
So sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. This is what happens when we go live. I was talking about Murray State heading down to Oxford as well as Western. They'll be both down in the Ole Miss Regional as they head down to Mississippi, which I think is unfortunate because you had 2 Kentucky schools. You'd like them to be, somewhere separate so they don't run into each other, but sometimes it is what it is. So nonetheless, they're playing, and that's what's most important, is that we've got 4 teams playing postseason baseball from the state of Kentucky. Along with that, Terry, I know you've been taking in a lot of high school baseball. We've got Trinity, we've got St. X. They're matching up tomorrow night in the championship at Jim Patterson Stadium, which I know you'll be taking a part of. So all that going on. There's a lot of college baseball, high school baseball right here in our backyard. So before we jump into the regional down in Nashville, how's everything going your way as you try to juggle all this time of the year?
It's a really fun time of year. I mean, at this time of year, I'm basically, in some way, shape, or form, able to find a game just about every night. So I always enjoy that. I love being at the ballpark. I love being able to talk to the kids before and after games, parents, whatever it is, coaches. And so just kind of get the lay of the land, try to get the scoop, you know what I mean? So fun to be out the ballpark yesterday, definitely with all 4 high school games over at Jim Patterson from the 6th and 7th regional in the semis yesterday. Obviously, we had media stuff with the coach, Coach Mack, and some players yesterday, and we're able to be in with their watch party. So it was a good day. A lot of fun right now, like you said. A lot of excitement just around the state, whether it's high school kind of wrapping up these regionals this week, or you get the 4 teams in, and are you're gonna take us through a little bit more about UK, or no?
We'll talk, yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about it because I think that's something around here locally. You and I've talked about it. Kentucky friends of mine, we've talked about it. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's touch on UK. Jump into it.
Yeah. So I thought UK was in. I really did. I didn't think UK was out at all. I think that's kind of I felt like they hit essentially the standard of what the threshold of what the SEC typically has or needs to get a team in. I don't personally much care about the argument of we lost this many one-run games. What does that mean?
Hmm.
Like that is a weird stat to me. Like, Coach Mack told me a couple years ago, bad teams lose one-run baseball games. I mean, that is a quote from him after a game, which I repeated to him at a time once after they had rattled off a few of those in a row, and then he might have wanted to walk that back a little bit, but. I'm not sure if it's necessarily just a fact, like a straight point, like if are losing a bunch of games in that way, but that doesn't, I don't know what that means. Like when people try to use that as an argument, like, oh, we're really close to beating this team. You didn't beat them. So I don't know I mean, it doesn't help your RPI to play them close after 5 innings or whatever the case may be. I think the fact of the matter was they had enough SEC wins. They, a couple big sweeps or series wins down the stretch over very good baseball teams. And what was it going to be like? How many bad teams are in the SEC that don't help your RPI? Missouri?
Missouri, and that's it, right?
That's it. And so you win 13 games, 12, 13, 14 games. That's enough. What did Florida win last year? 14?
Hmm.
And Florida made it to Omaha. And so I'm not saying that that's for every team for every year, but I never once thought UK was out. I'll be completely honest with you. Now, the Xavier and the UConn ones, like if you want to talk about like teams being snubbed and things, man, I feel bad for Xavier because they tried really hard. It just in terms of the non-conference, like I would like to see teams rewarded for like making an effort. I didn't feel bad for UConn. They're non-conference. They didn't do anything, and the team I did feel bad for, honestly, again, was Troy. They're just left standing at the altar again, and I mean, what more does that league have to do to get more teams in? I mean, you've got two teams. Sunbelt gets two teams in as hosts, and you're telling me that the third best team. I don't know, man. I just that one puzzles me a little bit. I feel bad for Skyler, great dude, and so obviously Louisville guy. So I feel bad for him that his team's not playing postseason baseball again. But as far as UK goes, I thought they were in. You thought they were out?
Well, it was funny. I was watching the D1 guys, Kendall Rogers, Aaron Fitt, and I can't remember Etheridge. Maybe I can't remember who the other one was on with them, and they
Etheridge,
were
yep.
kind of breaking down their their kind of last field of 64 projection. They did it live as they were talking about it and picking teams, and they came down to I think it was UK and Arizona State, I believe, were the last two they kind of had on the board for the last spot. And when they were comparing those two teams together, I was like, there's really no comparison. I think it has to be Kentucky. If you're down to Arizona State and Kentucky, it has to be Kentucky. They've got a strength of schedule of 8, RPI of 38. And like you said, that the mark you really have to hit in the SEC is 13 wins. If you get to 13 wins in the SEC, historically, you just don't miss the tournament, and they were 13 and 17. That's the mark that they hit. They were one and done in the conference tournament. They went to the single elimination format, kind of like the ACC did. They went down there, got beat, I think, by Oklahoma the first game, and that was it for them. So I think everybody was kind of down on them. But if you look at their whole body of work, like you said, they had some big series wins, and it to leave a team like that out. I tell you, you mentioned some teams that I thought got snubbed as well. But when you, like you said, you look at the Sun Belt, look at Coastal that's hosting, and who else they get that was hosting? Southern
Southern
Miss.
Miss.
So they've got two hosts. Now, when you see that come up on Sunday night, I was like, oh, Troy's good. Like if you've got the two top teams in the conference hosting, you've got a lot of respect for that league. You're not just gonna you're not gonna leave Troy out. And then they did. Another team that I felt bad for, and they didn't have all the metrics to back it up, but what a tough year for Virginia. To win 16 ACC games. They went 16-11. They had a couple games canceled, mainly the series at Florida State. because of the horrible shooting that took place on campus down there. So they lost a couple games that they didn't have the opportunity to play. You hate to think you win 16 games in the second best conference in baseball and don't make the tournament. But when your RPI is 64, there's really not much to back that up. Um,
That's that's what I. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was going to go on. I was going to kind of talk about Xavier too. So yeah, finish up on Virginia.
Well, much like I said about Xavier, Xavier and Virginia were so opposite to me just in terms of effort in
Yeah,
the non-conference
yeah,
because who'd Virginia, there was no one on there. I mean, they did go play that tournament in Puerto Rico. I know Michigan was there, who has their RPI was somewhere around 70. I know Stetson's down there, who's a quality program has been for a long time. But man, outside of that, there is very little effort given to trying to play anybody, even midweek type things, and so that's what they got punished for. I mean, when you took a look at the metrics, I think I read something on D1 last night. It may have been from Etheridge, where they were just talking about, okay, if they do win one of three at Florida State, it probably would have bumped them 5 spots, and that's still not enough.
hmm
Because that RPI was just a non-starter, and that's the thing about which we well know from last year, right? I mean, 16 ACC wins, but it was a non-conference that killed Louisville last year,
hmm
and so you
yeah.
knew with an RPI sitting around 60. I mean, I don't know if we've talked about it before on here. I didn't even watch the selection show. It was a non-starter last year, I thought.
Yeah.
So, I think that's kind of what happened to Virginia this year.
And just to kind of talk about Xavier a little bit more, their non-conference strength of schedule was 4, and you got to we remember because it happened here. They missed their game against Louisville. Like what? Yeah, it's 4. What happens if they come here and win that game? The RPI all of a sudden is much better. Strength of schedule is going to improve either way. I mean, they're not a whole lot. It's not going to go down. That's for sure. Playing a top 32 team. But Xavier, like you said, I mean, they did everything they possibly could to wheel their way into the tournament with a really, really impressive non-conference schedule. But nonetheless, the we've got the bracket. The only other one I want to touch on, in my opinion, that got snubbed, and they made the tournament, obviously, but Georgia Tech. I mean, I can't wrap my head around how the champion from the second best team in the country, regular season champion from the second best team in the country, doesn't get to host. I really struggle with that. But I think that's part of my ACC bias probably coming out. But I don't understand how Georgia Tech doesn't get their name called as one of the hosts. So that team's going to come out, in my opinion, pretty pissed off in the tournament. And unfortunately, they play Western, so I hope they don't take it out on the Toppers too bad down in Oxford. But I really would like to see Danny Hall host, a tournament at his place for his last hurrah as he retires after this season's over. So, but
I
let's.
think that. Oh,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
just was going to touch on that one too, just real quick. I thought that, again, like there was the one other thing about Virginia, I think, kind of came into play just a little bit with Georgia Tech in terms of I believe Virginia's conference schedule in terms of opponents faced was last in the ACC.
Yeah.
And Georgia Tech's was down a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
And
was.
with the RPI sitting around 22, this is the thing, like when you just look at it, same thing like when I think about, when you see so many people get upset about the men's basketball tournament. Well, you can't just say, oh, well, they should host. Well, then who shouldn't host?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And like when I look at the list, I thought it was more egregious that Coastal wasn't a top eight.
Yeah, that's crazy
So
to me. I don't understand how that happened.
I mean, those guys, you got to give it to Coastal, Southern Miss, these teams. I mean, those guys take on all comers in midweeks and whatever to make sure their teams are ready to go. Who knows? We could end up in Hattiesburg in a couple
Mm-hmm.
weeks. So, but no, there were some out there that were, there's always going to be some gripes from some teams, but much the same way that I talked about the ACC tournament in terms of lining up, or if however it is, if you didn't want to have Pitt hold their starter type deal, I mean, you want to be a host or you want to get in the tournament, win more baseball games, man. I mean,
Hmm.
it's really that simple. And so, like, for Virginia, yeah, you got 16 conference wins. Challenge yourself in the non-conference. I bet you they do next year. I bet you
Hmm.
their non-conference schedule looks a lot better. I think Georgia Tech would probably think the same thing, and some of those schools. So I don't really know what to say for Xavier, except for they're in the Big East and they didn't play well in the tournament, and that was unfortunate for them.
Yeah. So, well, enough of the rest of the tournament. Let's kind of lock in on the Nashville regional, where Louisville's going to be headed to play against Vandy. Well, not going to play against Vandy first game, but Vandy's going to be the host down there as they receive the number one overall seed. They've been on a tear lately. Won the SEC tournament. They're playing really good baseball. I watch a lot of the SEC tournament because it's on late. We talked about that before in the episode. It's you watch good TV late at night, and I'm a night owl, so it's a good time for me to catch some baseball. So I got to watch Vandy a little bit, and they've been really impressive as of late. Louisville got the two seed. I know we talked recently, two or three, where were they going to land? Held on to a two seed. East Tennessee State is the three, and Wright State is the four seed, who's a familiar face down there, Will Cook. We may get to see him as he plays for the Raiders after spending a couple years with the Louisville program. I do want to toss this out there. I saw on 643 charts, which I'm a big fan of. I think they do a really good job and put out a lot of really cool stuff and just kind of next level analytics and things like that. And I know they just put some algorithms in and plug the teams in, and it spits out this information. There's not like a person behind the computer being like, oh, I hate Louisville, I'm gonna fudge these numbers. It just is what it is. But if you look at 643 charts, like I said, love what they do. Go check them out. They broke down the winning percentage, or the chance to win each team of every regional out there. Vandy was 49%. East Tennessee State was 21%. Louisville was at 20%, and Wright State at 9%. If you look at the 16 regionals, Louisville is the only two seed that had a lower percentage to win the regional than any three seed of the other 15 regionals. So there's some bulletin board material out there. There's, a lot of the projections have East Tennessee State beating Louisville. So if you can search on Twitter. We've all got the same access. Look it up out there. So hopefully the team sees that and they have a little extra fire in their belly as they take them on. Because we'll jump into East Tennessee State for sure in a few minutes. They're not going to be a pushover. That's a very good baseball team. And the fans down in Nashville, I mean, this is what they play for. I mean, they've won national championships. Tim Corbin is a hell of a coach. They're going to be ready to go. I looked at tickets for that game. I saw a post. The get-in price for the Vandy Wright State game on Friday night was $467. Like that's just insane to me. That for a single session game to get in, it was $467. So I guess just kind of it's not initial thoughts now because we're past it. But when you saw the regional come out, it took all of what a minute for Louisville to see where they were going, because they were in the first regional announced on the selection show on Monday. But kind of first thoughts when you saw that Louisville was going to Vandy. I know that was a lot of people really thought that's where we were going. Just regionally, it made a lot of sense. But when you saw it, how did you feel about the draw?
Yeah, so obviously, like we had mentioned earlier, I was in the room with the boys, with the coaches when everything gets announced. It got up on the screen in the Omaha room, and so it comes out. Obviously, they're excited to see their name. I mean, when you hear Vandy's going to be the first one, well, immediately I get it rolling because I think this is a good chance that we hear our name called right here, right? So, uh, nice to see the name called right there. We talked about it on here last week, like you mentioned. Are we going to be, I think what we kind of had settled on was, are we one of the last four two seeds, or are we one of the first three, or first four three seeds? Um, to me, I think, again, we talked about it on here. As long as you end up in a place that you don't, I don't know, feel some huge disadvantage to go to, there's no difference. You're playing a two, you're playing a three. It's the matchup is basically the same. You're playing the same caliber of opponent. In terms of, I want to touch on that get in price just for a minute before I really get in. So that's I did not know that. That's crazy, but I think it does go to show a couple things. Number one, in case no one, in case you have not been there, that and in case you can't really tell on TV, it's small in there.
Hmm.
It's
It's tiny.
very small. I've been there a couple times. It's a very, very little ballpark.
And they
Not a
just
lot of
wedged it
seating.
in the rest of their complex. Like it doesn't fit. Like if you go there, it really doesn't seem like it was a place where they should have put a baseball stadium. It's so tight where they kind of put everything in.
Yeah. So have you been down there?
I have not, just the
Oh,
just the
okay.
photos, the aerial shots of it.
Yeah.
There was not room for a baseball field there.
No. So if you're on the concourse on the third base side, you are walking underneath the football stands. They are overhanging you. Off to the left. It's going over the top. So you're covered under there by the football stands when you're trying to get your drink. They got their little team store set up and all that kind of stuff and all that there, and that's all on that side until they. Now I know that they are going to do some renovations and some things like that. I don't, those are all in the works, and they're going to kind of really spruce that place up, and it's nice anyway. But it's a very, very small facility, and even just as far as the ballpark, the way it plays small. It does have a high wall, obviously in left field, but the ball still flies out of there. It flies in right, even it's just small. It's a pretty small ballpark. In terms of the draw, when you see it come out, you know that the fourth seed is going to be a local-ish team, right? It's going to be a regional team. So Wright State makes total sense. And as we well know, it's a good baseball program. We've seen them a number of years. Um, they've been very good, very competitive for the last decade or more. And so that's a good look. That's no pushover for Vanderbilt either
Hmm.
in to open that tournament up. But as far as ETSU, the main thing I knew with the draw for of getting them on a Friday was, oh, that team hits the baseball. I mean, like anyone who kind of follows college baseball nationally knows that team knows how to put runs on the board. So that was just kind of my initial thought. I will say that is why the numbers that you mentioned in terms of the percentages of what people are taking a look at 643, and I'm sure when we get into some ETSU stuff, you kind of saw some of the stuff that they put out about some ETSU. So they're very high on some ETSU players as well. But that when you take a look at the way Louisville closed the season, on the mound specifically versus the way ETSU hits the baseball, that's why those numbers are like that. That's why some people like them. That's exactly where that comes from, is the last 3 to 4 weeks of just putting those two puzzle pieces together. That's what people are looking at. But as far as Vanderbilt, look, if you get to face them, if you can get through Friday to get to Vanderbilt, the pressure's off Louisville at that point,
Hmm.
and all the pressure shifts to the home team, and so, or who knows, maybe even Wright State. So my initial thought was, thank goodness it's an easy drive. That was my very initial thought. But excited for the guys to get an opportunity, and that it's probably the easiest place for parents and fans to get to. Like, look, are you gonna have to shell out some cash if you want to go? It sounds like you're gonna have to shell some cash out if you want to get to these games. But I mean, if you want to shell it out, it's not that far away, and I'm sure the boys would love to have everybody down there to support.
Well, you're going to shell out, money for ticket prices, but you're not going to have to pay as much in the gas tank or a plane ticket or something like that. So, either way you're going to spend it, might as well stay closer to home and try to get some more fans down there, like you said. So I think we'll have a pretty good contingent of fans, just with family members. They're going to hopefully they can get tickets and pay whatever it takes to get in to see their kids or their nephews or brothers or whatever it may be. So hopefully the Cards fans are down there are going to be loud and hopefully bring back a couple of victories because we need it. It's good to be playing postseason baseball again in Louisville. Now it's time to go and go win a couple and try to get back to super and see what happens from there. So let's go ahead and hit and talk about the schedule and some TV times because there's some important stuff here. The So Louisville is going to play, like I said, East Tennessee State at 2 o'clock on Friday. That game is going to be on ESPN Plus. So if you want that to watch that game, you're going to have an ESPN Plus subscription to pay for. I meant to look up the prices. I don't know exactly what it is. I've got it, but I don't know what I pay for it. So look into that, but I think it's something you could probably cancel after a month if you need to. So just be mindful of that.
But if you've been able to watch Louisville baseball all year with ACC Network Extra, same deal.
You should be good to go.
You already have it. It's right there.
So then that evening, Vandy is going to play Wright State at 6 o'clock. That's going to be on the SEC network. The host team they get preference on those types of things. So they're going to play at 6, and they're going to let us bake out in the sun at 2 o'clock. Losers bracket game is going to be on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Winners bracket is going to be Saturday at 9 o'clock. TV stations have not been determined for those, and I believe the next day follows that same schedule. I think it's going to be 3 and 9 again. So just remember that 2 and 6 on Friday, and then 3 and 9 as the weekend progresses. So that's what the schedule is going to look like. I do want to remember, I haven't mentioned this since we've been on here, with us being live right now. Feel free to post any questions down in the chat. We've got a couple things rolling in that came in before we got started, and there's a few of those we'll probably cover as we get there. So let's talk about ETSU a few minutes, and then we'll jump into some of the questions. But if you got anything else you want us to talk about, feel free to drop in there, and we will certainly take those as we get through this. So we're going to talk about East Tennessee State probably more than the others, just because that's going to be our first game. That's who we're going to play first. Terry and I have talked about doing some lives as the weekend goes on. So if we continue to get interest, we'll continue to talk. So we'll cover East Tennessee State more tonight. Like you said, they've got some pretty impressive numbers. They finished the year 41-15, 14-7 in the SoCon. They won the regular season and the conference tournament. They're currently 36 in the RPI, which is just a couple spots behind Louisville, who finished 32. So they're not far behind where we are. Big difference here, in my opinion, is just kind of who they beat, though. They were 3-2 in quad 1 wins. They were 5-5 in quad 2 games, and then they were 13-4 in quad 3 and 20-4 in quad 4. So didn't have as many wins in quad 1 and quad 2 as Louisville did. I think Louisville had 12 quad 1 wins on the season, and ETSU had 3. So there's a big difference there. They did beat Tennessee on a midweek game. They won a series against Pitt. They played Virginia Tech twice. They lost both of them, but they played Virginia Tech twice. So they're battle tested. It's not like haven't played anybody all year long. Like, I'm not saying that. This is a quality opponent. Louisville, they've got their work cut out for them on Friday. The Bucks they're a good team. They're battle tested. 16 of their last 18 games, though, were against teams with greater than 100 RPI. So, and the only two that weren't were Samford, who they played their final 2 games in the SoCon tournament. So, they really went through a long stretch where they didn't play anybody inside the top 100. So I think that's going to be, they just haven't seen quite the opponents that Louisville's seen this year, but still, when they've played better opponents, they've proven that they can win those games. So we'll talk about some of the awards that they've won. They swept the SoCon this year, all 4 major awards: Coach of the Year, Pitcher of the Year, Freshman of the Year, and Player of the Year. We'll dive into those here in a minute. I know you've looked into ETSU. We've talked about them a little bit. What are your initial thoughts on the matchup and what they kind of present to Louisville?
Yeah, so it's definitely a team, like I mentioned before, and you just kind of touched on it a little bit there. With all the award wins and the schedule in terms of who they were able to beat, what they were able to do, against other SoCon opponents. I mean, you're 100% right. They have not played this level of competition very often. They did test themselves, like you mentioned, a little bit, midweeks, things like that. It's not very far for them to get over there and play Virginia Tech. Obviously, they get Pitt. They did get the midweek with Tennessee. And so, much like we saw with some different midweeks, right, where we would play maybe a team kind of that caliber, like a Western Kentucky, is probably just in terms of level of opponent, that's probably around the same level in terms of just if you're looking for a comp on of someone that we've already played. That's a mid-major opponent, I guess that I mean.
Yep.
So that's kind of what you would want to think of just in terms of that, which we all know Western is a very good baseball team.
Mhm.
And so, plenty of good players there, plenty of good players here. Look, they hammer the baseball. So the pitching is going to lag behind. And what they have not seen very often is an offense like Louisville brings to the table. Uh, Look, could this potentially end up being a slow pitch softball type score? It could be. I mean, a lot of that'll depend on our what our pitching does, on Friday afternoon. But my initial thoughts when just taking a quick look at them, first off, is we're going to score runs. That's my initial thought. My second thought is, boy, they hit. uh, and they really hit. I mean, it's like their batting averages. Louisville's is up there. Theirs is like 10 points higher, I think, as a team. Um, they hammer the baseball out of the ballpark. Again, you have to take some of these things with a grain of salt, potentially, just because of the opponent. So, some of the things that we talk about during the year, right? When we're talking about, okay, we've turned this many double plays and we're ranked 24th. Well, we kind of factored out, some non-conference, some non-power four schools, right? And so this would be one of those schools on an offensive side that we would kind of maybe those numbers might not be the same, right? If they played an ACC schedule every weekend. So I think that's the hard part about it. But initially, what jumps off the page, man, those boys hit the basement. I mean, it's 115 homers. Is that what it is? 115?
116,
116 homers. I
fourth in
mean,
the country.
fourth in the country. And like I said, it's a little ballpark, man. The ball flies out of there. And it's, I'm trying to think, was it 2 years ago Eddie King robbed that homer in there?
I think it
In
was.
center? All right.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to bring that back. But, Eddie owes somebody a robbery, right? I mean, the baseball gods owe Eddie that he either needs to get a bounce off someone's glove or he needs to take one back away from someone else. But, uh, that was my kind of initial thought is, ooh, for East Tennessee State, number one, they might like their draw too. Um, you've got to look at it that way as well. They might be thinking, ooh, small ballpark, maybe a pitching staff that's scuffling a little bit the last month. That's, might be a little tired, might be a little worn down. That's probably the way they're thinking. And so, I got to be honest, I think both teams probably like the draw.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And you're talking about some stats. Let's do a little comparison on a couple things that I pulled up because I start looking at them initially. And I'm like, man, this team hits the baseball and they hit the baseball hard throughout the lineup. It's not just a couple guys. Like you said, they're hitting 313 as a team, which is 18th in the country. Louisville's hitting 306 as a team, so it's 33rd in the country. I think if you um, take into consideration strength of schedule and things like that, those numbers probably balance out a little bit more. But nonetheless, they still got to stand in the box and hit the baseball, and they're getting on base often. Fielding percentage, they're 973. Louisville's 970, so pretty comparable there. ERA, they're a little bit better. They're 444. Louisville's 572. Stolen bases, this may become a problem for them. Louisville stole 146 bases this year, which is ninth best in the country, and the Buccaneers, they've stolen 89, and one player has 27 of those. So it's not like you've got an entire lineup that's full of guys that are going to steal bases, where Louisville, obviously Lucas Moore leads the way, right? Like we know that, we've watched baseball, but Louisville's got a ton of guys throughout the lineup that can run. So that I'm curious to see what that's going to look like and how East Tennessee can handle Louisville's running game. Is it going to be a game like I think it was Florida State where Louisville stole 14 games? It was like every time somebody got on, Coach Mack was like, green light, go. Or do we see that in their catcher? So it'll be curious to see what the preparation looks like because I think that's one thing that when you play some of the mid-major schools, they don't always have that catcher that can throw out elite level base runners. So curious to see how that's going to come into play. Got to get guys on. They can't steal if they don't get on base. So that's going to be a big component to it. And then you talked about the home runs. They've hit 116, which is insane. That's fourth best in the country. Louisville's hit 72, which is 74th best in the country. So I do want to jump over and take a couple questions now that we've kind of run down some stats, and then we'll dive into East Tennessee State a little bit more because there's a lot to talk about with this roster. But a few things. Willie Clarkson, our guy who came in, I believe, from Texas a couple weeks ago, threw out a first pitch. So we can't against Wake Forest. We can't not take his question. We got a guy that's throwing out first pitches. We got to answer what he's going to say. He said, and Coach Mack talked about this. So Terry, I'll let you touch on this. You know, we've had some injuries that have impacted us for some or most of the season. Will we see Matt or Parker in the postseason? And Coach Matt kind of talked about it. You were there. If you want to kind of allude to what he said about those two guys.
Yeah, so you're definitely going to see Matt. I mean, Matt's ready to go. Um, he's not 100%, but he's ready. I mean, he's still, again, as you well know, I mean, I'm not really a guy I don't really discuss guys' injuries, but I will just say this: Matt is, uh, you saw him get to catch a little bit, caught an inning last week, couple at bats. Um, he's gonna catch. Whether he's able to go back to back days, that remains to be seen because I think that's kind of the part that might be just missing a little bit, just in terms of what does the stamina look like in the heat, the gear on, all that kind of stuff, where he hasn't had as many of those reps over the last couple months, obviously since we lost him. But Matt is 100% going to play this weekend. Not a doubt in my mind. He is going to start this weekend. He's in the lineup. You got I don't know where Dan's going to place him in the lineup. I would have a hard time thinking he was going to slot him immediately back in the four hole. But one thing that you did see in the pit game that I thought was really good was Matt clearly did not lose his understanding of the strike zone over that couple months off, because he got up there and I mean the discerning eye was still there. He was locked in on what his strike zone was, looking for his pitch. So that was great to see from my standpoint, just that he, especially that first at bat, that was really, really good. So, yes, 100% Matt is going to play. By the way, shout out Willie, man. That's freaking awesome. He's a great fan. I love his interactions on Twitter. He's always just upbeat, supportive. That's a great fan. I mean, like, he is on board. He's supporting the boys. Nothing's over the top negative. He's looking for I want that. Give me that glass half full guy. Willie seems to be that guy at least most of the time, right? So that's all I can ask for. So shout out to Willie for that. As far as Parker, you're not going to see Parker. I don't really want to get into everything about Parker, as you know. I'm not. That's just not what I do. That doesn't mean I don't know. I do know. But I'm not gonna divulge. If kids don't want to divulge what their injuries are, I don't do it. He's 20 years old. But I'll just say you're not going to see Parker this year, and so that's really that's as much as I'll say about it.
Anything to add on Willie? He added this also. Anything to add on Pike or Alisea for the weekend?
Yeah. So as far as Pike goes, I would expect. I mean, if he doesn't, now there's more moving pieces with Matt back, right? Where now you have Matt back. Now you still have Eddie, who's been swinging a hot bat. You've got Pike. He's a little banged up, but he's better in the field. So there's some moving pieces in there to try to figure out in terms of getting that lineup set. Pike will definitely play, though, this weekend. You'll see Pike out there. By the way, wait till you see some of these boys' hair. I mean, listen, man, I was at the ballpark yesterday, and what these dudes were doing down in that basement is insane. So, I mean, Jack Brown, I mean, he's got I don't want to give everybody's stuff away, because I will let you see it on TV, but these dudes are all in on just changing some hairstyles, right? So the one kid who I thought was hilarious yesterday at the ballpark, who was like, "Nah, dude, I'm not messing with." Brandon Crawford was not. He was not touching his hair. He's like, "Nah, I'm not doing that." Ty Stark was funny. He's had the bleach blonde the whole time. He said, "Nah, I was postseason ready from day one." So Ty Stark was ready for postseason baseball. February 14th, so he was ready to go. But Pike, you will definitely see what Dan said yesterday about Alisea was, look, obviously he's banged up, but he wants to play.
Yeah.
And you're not going to keep him out of there. And so if he is physically able to get out on the field, he is going to play. I would say look for Alisea on Friday afternoon to be your starting shortstop. Will he be up in that two hole? I don't know. I kind of doubt it, just the way that the hand is moving, but it wouldn't surprise me again if he's, that 10 days off. Maybe he's had time to rest it up a little bit, but Alisea will be somewhere in the lineup on Friday afternoon. And you would definitely see him at shortstop for sure.
So one thing I guess to kind of touch on, I know Dan briefly mentioned it a little bit as well as the starter. He was asked about who's going to start on Friday night, and as a coach, I say Terry, I thought you asked that. As a coach, you kind of tiptoe around that, right? Like you don't want to show your hand on a Monday, a game you're going to play on Friday. They don't do that in the regular season. They sure don't want to do that in the postseason. I guess if you're the coaching staff, we've seen how consistent Everly's been for the past 6 weeks, a month and a half, 2 months. We've talked about him on here every single week for the past, gosh, I don't know how long now. Obviously, Patrick Forbes, when he's got his best stuff, he's a top 20 player, in this draft class. If you're the coach, if you're McDonald, like, what direction do you think he'll go with those two guys? It's a good problem to have, right? But it's one of those things that if you get it wrong, we've talked about this numerous times on here too. Baseball is a game that you continue to second guess yourself. It's so easy to do that in this sport. You got two good options. Who do you go with, or what direction do you think he goes this weekend against East Tennessee State to open the tournament?
So I asked the question. First off, I couldn't believe no one else asked the question. But of all the questions that were asked, I thought that was going to be a key one, especially when Pat was coming behind him to speak. But I thought, for me personally, you got to win the first game. So to me, that means you have to throw your best arm. That's just the way I would do it. I wouldn't want to second guess myself later and think, oh man, I really wish I would have thrown Forbes out there, But I understand the thought of, well, could we beat East Tennessee State and save Forbes for Saturday night, against, prime time, Vanderbilt, under the lights. And let me tell you, I know we don't know TV designations. Let me assure you, if it's Louisville versus Vanderbilt, it's going to be on national television somewhere. I guarantee you that. 9 p.m. on one of those ESPN networks or the SEC network. Louisville, if it's Louisville Vanderbilt, they put that game on every single year anyway when it's a regular season game. It's going to be on television if that's the matchup. But if that's what it is on Saturday night, and you've got Forbes going, then you feel, oh hey, we got our number one guy. He's back. He's healthy. It's a tough call, and I'm telling you, I think he might throw Bivin. I'm prepared to. So on Thursday afternoon, there's open practices for all teams, and then there's another media availability. I am already prepared to ask again. I think he'll let it out at that point. I don't. Maybe he won't. But I am 100% going to ask again and see if he'll give it away, or I think somebody will let me know during the day. But I think that might be the play. I think it's one of those two guys. I think it's Forbes or I think it's Bivin. That's just that's just a gut feeling. No one has told me that in any way. And like I said, like you said, I tried to get it out of Dan. I knew he wasn't going to answer, but I figured I'd ask anyway. But that's just my gut. My gut feeling is, especially how good Tucker was last time. He's pitched in big environments. He's been pitched in that ballpark. Things like that. I think those things play a factor there.
Well, I also think having upperclassmen like Tucker and Patrick who've been here and done it before, and nothing against Ethan Everly, obviously. I mean, we've talked, glowingly about him, but postseason, things hit a little bit different. It's everybody's a little bit more juiced up. They're ready to go. Like you said, a ballpark like that, ball's traveling a little bit further maybe. You don't want to get in a situation maybe like we were against Pitt in the ACC tournament if we have a rough start and then you've got to go through a couple different guys because you don't want to lose that first game, right? Getting in the losers bracket off the bat is tough. So Biffen is a different approach. I honestly never that didn't cross my mind, but I could see them making that move. I will say this: everybody's rested. We've had 10 days to get in between our last game till we're going to play on Friday. Everybody's going to be well rested. I don't think. I mean, obviously nobody's off the table. This is a game that you have to win, and that's a good one. I did honestly never thought about Biven getting the ball on Friday.
One of the main reasons that I think that is this: if you throw Tucker on Friday, if you get to Sunday and say you get in that Sunday early, say you're in the Sunday early, I mean, you got to play all the scenarios out in your, you gotta go through all of them and think of what you might want to do. So if you get in that early Sunday game, or you're able to get to the regional final game, if you've had to go through the loser bracket, however it works, if Tucker's thrown 5 innings, if he's had a day, you could get an inning or two out of him, I think.
True.
I think Tucker would be more able to bounce back and come back than either one of those other two guys. And so that's where my thinking is I just think you might be able to get an inning out of Tucker later in the weekend if you need one, versus if you throw Forbes, that's it for the weekend. I think if you throw Eberly, that's it for the weekend. So that's my only line of thinking there. Well, not my only, but that's one of my lines of thinking, is that he could come back later in the weekend if he throws on Friday.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Tucker's a guy, he can bounce back on short rest. He's obviously done it before. His last outing, we saw him throw up around 79 pitches. So, we've seen him be able to stretch out. And if you can, get him to throw 79 pitches, in that ballpark or even a little north of that, get him, 4 or 5 innings and then turn this thing over, I think you got to feel pretty comfortable about, staying in the winner's bracket against the Bucks. So let's look at some of the other questions. If you got anything, feel free to shoot them to us. We'll run through a couple of these. We'll touch plenty after the season's over as far as transfers, newcomers, that stuff. We'll get into that stuff. There'll be plenty of time to talk about that. I know you start to see some transfers hit the portal from teams that are out of it, and Kentucky's already got 2 commits from players that are out. So I know we're starting to see some of that pop up. We'll talk about that more in detail when the season's over. But let's jump into East Tennessee State a little bit more, because like you said, this is a impressive roster. Cooper Torres, he was Player of the Year in the SoCon. Brady Frederick was Pitcher of the Year in the SoCon. Funny enough, Terry, you and I were texting about him earlier today. He's a reliever. Guy doesn't start, which it's kind of, typically your Pitcher of the Year goes to the best starter in the conference. So I would say, if depending on how the game plays out, I would say there's a very, 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 very good chance that Louisville sees him on Friday. If things start to get out of hand, I would say he's the first guy they're going to go to. They want to win that first game just as well as everybody else. And if you've got to go to your best pitcher right out of the bat, go to him in the second inning. Let's say we start, score a couple runs, get a couple guys on base, you may see him come in early. If it gets to the end of the game and it's a close game, you're going to see, at some point in time, I have a hard time thinking that we're not going to see Frederick on Friday afternoon. Axel Melendez, he was Freshman of the Year, and then their coach, Joe Panucci, I hope I'm saying that correctly, was coach of the year in the SoCon. Cooper Torres, a guy that, like I said, was player of the year. He batted 378, hit 23 home runs, 72 RBIs. He led the team in doubles, home runs, and RBIs. He's a dude that we've talked about some of them before. He can beat you by himself. He's that type of guy, that type of player. Frederick, out of the bullpen as the pitcher of the year, he was 8-1 with no starts, which is just wild to me. 2.54 ERA. Made 23 appearances this year, had 9 decisions. And I think the most crazy thing to me about his stat line is that he was second in the team in innings pitched as a reliever. They had guys that started, 14, 15 games, and he threw more innings than they did. And then Axel Melendez, like I said, the freshman of the year, he hit 307 with 12 doubles and 6 home runs. You look up and down the lineup, they all hit home runs. I mean, it's like I said, that's just the makeup of who they are. Reminds me of that Tennessee Tech team from a couple years ago. It seems like that's all they did was hit bombs. Very familiar opponent that Louisville's faced, throughout the years, but they remind me a lot of them. They had 11 players that earned postseason accolades. So I mean, it's not just a dude here and a dude there. It's up and down the whole entire roster. We're probably going to see Carter Fink on Friday. That's been their starter for the past. I went back 4 weekends, and he was the Friday guy. And I was like, that's enough for me to go back. I don't need to go back any further. So he's probably who we're going to see. He's got a 3.97 ERA. He's 6-4 this year, but he's a guy that doesn't go deep into the games. He's averaging, 4, not even 5 innings a game. So he's a guy that we could get to early. Try to chase him off the mound. Unfortunately, if you do, you're probably going to get Frederick to come in, but nonetheless, get him out. He's not a high swing and miss guy. Louisville's, that's kind of been a strength of ours, national, compared to other teams. So hopefully that doesn't bite us on Friday. But he's not a high swing and miss guy, so we should have the opportunity to put the ball in play. So a lot of studs up and down the lineup. I mean, this is a team that is really. I mean, they're going to make us work. They defend it well. They pitch it well. They hit it extremely well. So. All that to be said, Terry, let's just kind of talk about our thoughts about this game. Like, what do we, I guess not prediction-wise, or I guess we could take it that way, but what do you see happening in this game? How do you see Louisville faring against East Tennessee State Friday afternoon?
So it's definitely going to be a game where, in terms of us on the mound, you've got to keep the ball down. That is the number one priority. Is you cannot leave it up because they will hammer it. Like you said, it's not just a couple guys; it's the lineup. I mean, that's how they score. They, guys get on base and they jog home. I mean, that's, you mentioned, you talked about the stolen bases. That's not what they do. They get on and then they trot home. So you've got to locate. And I think, if you've seen this Louisville team play the last 3-4 weeks, right, that's been what's missing a little bit. And there have been some other things missing as well. I'm not in any way, shape, or form willing to put, the finish the last few weeks on only pitching. But there have been times where we've hit and not pitched. There have been times where we pitched and not hit. So, and that's kind of how baseball goes sometimes, right? But if you are a guy that throws that sinker, that thing's got to be sinking. You cannot leave curveballs up. They will fly out of the ballpark. And so they've got some nice little grandstands out there in the outfield at Vanderbilt. Hopefully they're catching a lot more Louisville home runs than they're catching ETSU home runs. I will say this, as far as Frederick goes, 100% agree. We're going to see him. I don't care if we're ahead or behind, and even for them, whether they're ahead or behind, he's going to be in because he's either going to be coming in to try to allow them to get back into a game, or he's going to come in and, hey, give us these last 4 or 5 innings, whatever it may be, and get us across the finish line. But there's not a whole lot there pitching wise outside of that. Now, that doesn't mean that guys can't have their day. I mean, look what Nebraska did this past
Mm.
weekend in the Big Ten. They
Yep.
got guys who have, they had a guy who had not thrown more than 2 innings at a time the whole year through seven innings on Sunday. And that's insanity. And look, those type of magical things happen in postseason baseball where some guy just does something out of nowhere, and you hope it doesn't happen to your team. But that's their guy, right? We're gonna see him. I'll almost guarantee it, unless it gets really out of hand, really fast, one way or the other, we're likely to see him. As far as Torres goes, second baseman, correct?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
Um, 643 charts, which you talked about earlier, had him as the number two second baseman in America today. And so, you start to piece together some of these numbers, you start to look deeper into some analytical numbers. And let me tell you something, they had him ahead of Voigt at Michigan. They had him as third. And look, I have not seen Torres play. Now, I watched maybe 4 to 5 innings of ETSU this afternoon. But like, if if you're ahead of Voigt, you can play.
Mm. Mm.
Period. Because that kid's a second round draft pick, and so if you're, we've talked about this before about not letting studs beat you, and how we've got some, we've talked jokingly about Grice, right, at Clemson, right, that I'll think about, I'm not even joking, I'm gonna be on my deathbed thinking about Caden Grice hitting bombs, like he hit 4 in a weekend, 5,
Yeah.
whatever it was, ridiculous. Or Tommy White hitting 3, 4 bombs at Louisville when he was a freshman with NC State. Some of these different guys over the course of, we've had Virginia Tech's had multiple dudes do it to us over the years, right? Where they just got dudes that just hammer the ball. And so this is the type of team that does that. This is the type of team that hammers the baseball like that, and that you've got to be very careful in, especially in specific situations. Look, you can pitch with the bases empty, you can pitch completely different than you can with some different guys on base. And so, oh man, to me, like I said, it all comes down to the. I think the offense is going to be there. I really do. I think we're going to hit them. That's the way this looks on paper anyway. The key again, get it. Let our defense play. It's okay. Let them play behind us. They're good enough.
Mm.
More than good enough, especially at some spots. Uh, Find me a shortstop you want that's better defensively than Alisea. You might find one as good, maybe, but you're not going to tell. You're not. I'm not even joking. You're not going to find one.
Mm.
Not in the country that's better defensively than Alex Alisea. He's that good. In terms of guys that can go and get it in the outfield, Moore can go get it, man. I
Mm.
mean, he can run down balls in gaps. Zion's got some wheels. Even Pike plays a great
Mm.
right field, got a big arm.
His arm. Yeah.
I do want to say, I feel like we have not talked about his arm enough on here. Um, I, so underrated. What an underrated tool that kid has. I mean, it's not Humphrey's arm in terms of like, just firing a bullet out of a gun to third base, but it's a big arm. It's accurate. Whether he's trying to cut down a run at home, try to cut down throw a guy out long to third, going to second, he's got it all. That kid can throw. So I like the makeup around the diamond. We always know Davis is ready to pick it at first base. We've talked about that before on here. And again, the key defensively to me, Matt Klein is back behind the plate. And I don't mean that as a slight to any of the other guys, because they were asked to do things that they were not ready to do yet. And so, another year of seasoning, some summer ball, some more work. We could get some guys more ready to play every day, but those kids were not ready to play every day. And they did an admirable job, especially at some time, sometimes better than others for sure. That could be said around the diamond. But Matt Klein back behind the plate means a couple things. It means less pass balls, it means less wild pitches, and it means more stealing strikes. Matt is very, very good at receiving the baseball and stealing strikes. So if you're able to take a look at some of these charts where you get a percentage, right, of like what he got versus what he should have got, Matt is elite at that type of thing. So uh, that is a I don't want to say I don't care if he hits, but I don't, for the most part, don't care if he hits. Him being behind the plate is a huge, huge deal. That is probably not being. We probably haven't. We could have led with that.
Hmm.
So that's a massive deal for this team, and just not just to get your captain back, not just to get a leader, not just to get that voice back on the diamond. The things he brings defensively like that cannot be overstated.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think as I was kind of looking over ETSU and just kind of watching a little bit of what they do and how I think they're going to approach the game on Friday, I agree with you 100% on the offense. We're going to score runs. Or like you said, is this going to be a men's league softball game where we're looking at a 10-8 game or a 12-10 game or something like that, like we saw at Pitt, in the ACC tournament? Are we going to see something like that? But I don't really have concerns about us moving the baseball. I think Louisville's going to get back to the offense that we've seen all year long. I mean, that's what we've done. That's who we are. We've had a couple games where we haven't scored, but I think I'm not worried about that. Like that's just what we're going to do against this lineup. But we got to find the strike zone. We've had some issues with that a little bit down the stretch. We got some guys back. I think I said it before and I'll say it again. I think the 10 days rest is going to be massive for the pitching staff. Offensively, they were in a groove. They were doing their thing anyways. Rest is good for anybody, right? But pitching staff, don't touch a baseball for a day here, don't touch a baseball for a day there, or just focus on getting yourself ready, your body ready for the NCAA tournament, and give your arm a little break. I think that's going to be huge. Obviously, we were frustrated with the Pitt loss. Everybody was. But I think the silver lining is we're going to be healthy. And not that we've been injured all year, but not that any of the guys that we're talking about have been real banged up lately, but it's more of a rest thing than it was an injury thing. So I think we may look back on that Pitt loss and be like, okay, it was worth it because we were able to get everybody some rest under their belt. So Terry, I know you're heading down there on, I guess probably Friday. You're heading down Thursday night.
No, I'm gonna go Thursday morning so I can watch practice and do the media session on Thursday. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nashville's always a fun town. Hope you enjoy it down there. It looks like we have one question come through. I don't know the answer to that. I think the answer is no. The Battle of the Barrel, it does not count for postseason games, right? It's just a regular season thing, right? Yeah. Because I guess we could pass it back and forth a couple times. So we play Vandy once and lose to them, and then you beat them later to take it back. So no barrel. I thought that was just a regular season thing. So that will not be up for grabs this weekend. But we've got it. Hopefully we get to play them, and it doesn't matter. We'll just keep it because hopefully we're gonna beat them anyways. So I know we spent a lot of time talking about East Tennessee State tonight. That's our first opponent, so that's who we're focusing on the most. Looks like we've had quite a bit of interest. I think we are up around 930 people in here tonight. So we appreciate everybody hopping in. We plan on coming back this weekend as the weekend progresses. Hopefully we talk about a couple wins and can kind of build on that. If you're going down this weekend, be safe heading down. Cheer on the Cards. Hopefully we bring back a couple big wins. Terry, like I said, he'll be there, boots on the ground in Nashville, talking to players, coaches, and all that good stuff, collecting some video and audio interviews throughout the weekend so you can get as close to the players and program as you possibly can. So, Terry, I know you do every week, but for those that don't always tune into us, let them know where they can find your content because they definitely need to be catching up with you this weekend as you're in Nashville.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, X, whatever you prefer to continue to call it or start calling it. At Inside Vill BSB, VILLEBSB. If you see me, like we've said multiple times, you see me out the ballpark. I'll be at Jim Patterson tomorrow for both regional finals. If you see me there, you see me down in Nashville, please stop and say hi. Tell me some. I can take criticism as well. You don't have to just lie to me and tell me you love everything. So I'm all for some constructive criticism. You want to flip me off or whatever you want to do. If you don't like it, but no, say hey. Love to interact with people that interact with the stuff and meet people that enjoy or at least follow along or whatever it is. So but yeah, you can find all there in terms of the I'll push all the interviews out on X afterwards. But yeah, we'll get all post game reaction from Coach Mack and players after every game. Should have some stuff on Thursday as well. Like I said, from some media availability after being able to watch practice. I'm gonna get some photos. Definitely gonna take some photos this weekend and make sure I get some stuff put up. So I'm gonna do a lot of media stuff this weekend. Really excited about it. But if you wanna follow along with that stuff just on YouTube here, you can find me at Inside Louisville Baseball on YouTube. If you want to go ahead and subscribe, I'd appreciate that as well. I don't think I really ever say that on here, but I would appreciate that too. So just a lot of post game stuff is mostly what I do that way, or just highlights and things like that at high school games. So. But appreciate everybody following along and everybody joining in. We get almost double the amount of people tonight that we had the last time. So that's pretty awesome. So just a sincere thank you for everybody for following along with us. Like Matt has said before, baseball is a little more of a niche type thing, right, in terms of just the fan base. But this Louisville fan base can be great, especially around this time of year where you can rally around this team. The weather warms up, people get invested. They want to see. And this team, I'm telling you, man, they're capable. They're capable of doing it this weekend. So I anticipate we're going to go down there and play some really good baseball. I'm pumped up.
Yeah, I'm excited. You see Vandy's the number one team in the country, but I just see that as a challenge, right? We you beat them a couple weeks ago. Obviously, it's much different. It's a midweek game. You see different pitchers. You see different rosters, different lineups. But these two teams are familiar with each other. We've played them in the postseason a lot. This isn't anything new for either program. We've won down there before. We've won up here before. Like we know them. They know us. It's going to be exciting. Like you said, the get-in price is crazy, and when they play us, it's going to be even higher than 467 or whatever that number was. That's just going to continue to elevate as the series goes on if Louisville and Vandy play each other. So exciting weekend in Nashville. I hope ahead. And like I said, like you were saying, this is a opportunity, I think, for Louisville fans. There's no basketball, there's no football. Right now, it's time to turn to baseball, and here we are. So we're just trying to get content out as much as we possibly can. And Terry, with you being boots on the ground, that's a big help to get inside the program as much as we possibly can. So safe travels down there this weekend. This will be turned into a podcast. So if you missed any of it, you'll be able to listen to it on Apple, Spotify, and it'll be up on YouTube. So appreciate everybody hopping in with us tonight. I appreciate all the questions, and we will be back this weekend, hopefully, to talk about some wins as the weekend progresses. And in the words of Sean Moth, we will see you at the ballpark.